We hold the capacity to self-heal, not always under all circumstances, but I've seen quite the majority that it's quite possible. So in that moment of feeling unresourceful, we try to evade and avoid. And that's where the problem comes in, because the body's language to speak to you becomes louder and it becomes more intense. The reason why that inner voice feels so silent and so quiet is because we need to be able to feel our emotions, to be able to decode that inner voice. Because that inner voice speaks to you through emotions and sensations. Every single time, overreactions, it's a clear sign that something deeper is going on. You've walked into a room, right? There's no one there. And then suddenly you just felt, oh, I feel really down right now. Oh, this doesn't feel good. I don't feel welcome here. That's because of the stress of the previous person, or maybe the collective amount of people that was in that room. And you're feeling the aftermath of that. Because what's incredibly important for me, and I'm very strict about this, is that you don't have to relive your trauma to heal it. I can't tell you how many times I have had people come to me trying to heal something that never happened. That was a stress-induced heart attack. And what that taught me was how my anger, my unresolved anger towards my father deeply impacted me subconsciously, consciously, and throughout my body as well. If you want to damage and destroy your heart, hold on to that anger. I needed to completely reconstruct my definition of success, how I achieve my goals, and how I love myself, because I needed to learn to feel safe.
Today's guest blends heart healing and holistic science in a way that might change the way you see your body and your past. She's a counseling psychologist, international speaker, retreat facilitator, and she's the author of 21 books. Her most known work, Metaphysical Anatomy, Your Body is Talking, Are You Listening? She has helped thousands of decode emotional trauma hidden beneath about 722 medical conditions. Joining us from Bali, Indonesia, please welcome Dr. Evette Rose to the show.
Hi, Rosabel. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and I'm thrilled to be here with you today to dive into this topic.
Welcome again. I've been looking forward to this conversation because your work hits many layers: psychology, trauma, recovery, spirituality, and even medical insights. Why don't we start by, you work with 7,000 people in 43 different countries. What patterns do you see over and over again in the body, regardless of culture and background?
What I notice is we all have different ailments. And what I learned when I started to work with people, at first I thought it was a coincidence. I noticed that someone who has irritable bowel syndrome in America and someone that has irritable bowel syndrome in New Zealand, even though they have different diets, different allergies, different belief systems, they were raised differently. But it struck me in such a powerful way that they all shared the same trauma and how they continue to be affected emotionally as a result of that trauma. The symptoms of trauma. So sometimes when we feel hurt in the past, we have symptoms as a result. Maybe we trust less. Maybe we feel a little bit more cautious with people. These are all symptoms, but the root of the trauma was maybe betrayal in our childhood, or it could have been any other stage of our life. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Why is that? And the only conclusion that I could come down to is that we share the same biological blueprint for how we respond to trauma and then how we emotionally respond to it. We have the trauma. Then we have the response to the trauma when we have time to either assess how it made us feel, what happened. That's when we start to have an opinion about what we experienced. For children, it's a little bit different. We don't necessarily have that awareness quite yet. We develop that awareness later in life when we start to feel these patterns and habits are a little bit problematic. We still formulate opinions around how we feel. And even these opinions, how we assess how we felt after traumatic or stressful experiences, normally in most cases also end up being the same. And I thought, this is incredible, because now my head is sitting, I'm scratching my head. I'm like, my head's going 1,000 miles an hour. I'm thinking, what else can this possibly mean? And what this also can mean is that if we respond a certain way in unity to trauma and stress, does that maybe mean if we apply the right tool, that we will all most likely have the same release. So this is where I just started to dive deep. I took out my magnifying glass and I became like an investigator to learn and understand how, why, and what if. So this is when I started to work on myself and observing different clients, how they respond to different mythologies, how they responded to different tools. And especially, of course, you look at people who have, and I'm just using IBS as an example because I think this is a very relatable example, even headaches that do not have an underlying medical cause. But sometimes even pain that has an underlying medical cause can still be triggered and exacerbated by strong negative emotions. Pain can also be a result of strong negative emotions. We call that psychosomatic pain. Isn't that interesting? Even pain have similar roots for everyone when it becomes magnified. This really hit the curious button in my nervous system in a good way. I just wanted to dive into this and see what else is possible. What else does that mean for us? Because I love to dive into work and anything that can help us raise our potential. The beauty that I learned by looking at these different elements is that we hold the capacity to self heal, not always under all circumstances, but I've seen quite the majority that it's possible. Now I'm asking, how do we nurture that? How do we improve that? How can we dive deeper into that to support the body, to strengthen its self-healing capacity?
Hi everyone. As a neurology nurse practitioner, I've seen how overwhelming health information can be. Between medical jargon, online noise, and conflicting advice, people often feel lost. That's why I created Rosabel to make brain and health education simple, approachable, and empowering. Inside this membership area, you'll find practical tools like the Resource Center, where you can download free guides, forms, and worksheets that help you track your health and better understand your body. You'll also find exclusive content where I share insights about brain function, stress, migraines, memory, and many other topics, all explained in everyday language. And one of the most meaningful parts of Rosa Believers is our Facebook community. This space was built so that subscribers can connect, communicate, and learn from each other. Here's where you can ask questions, share your progress, support each other, and be part of real conversations about brain health, self-care, and personal growth. Because while learning is important, community is what keeps us motivated and remind us that we're not
Also,
alone.
in your book, you mentioned the body speaks the language of emotion. How do you help people translate that language?
So one of the things is that we don't like to feel our feelings. That's one of the reasons why it's difficult to understand what is the body trying to tell us. We're negative biased. We shy away from things that makes us feel uncomfortable, especially if we don't understand what is happening and don't know what to do with feeling why we feel the way that we do. Pill popping nation, right? So we love to pop a pill for pain or take something for nausea. There's always something that we can go to, like a coping strategy, a coping mechanism. Maybe we eat, maybe we have a glass of wine, maybe we exercise excessively to get that adrenaline, that anxiety out of our system. These are tools to support us. These tools are not necessarily going to resolve the issue at its core, meaning so that it can stop coming back. Normally, what I see is people apply the wrong solution to the problem. And it comes down to not fully understanding that miscommunication. When I feel something, I would call it almost like decoding it, because you feel like you're decoding a code, right? Because the body speaks through emotions, symptoms, and sensations. When we've experienced a lot of trauma, a lot of heightened stress, sometimes get stuck in that freeze response. We dissociate. So we feel numb. It's harder to get into the feelings and emotions of that. The first thing to do is to change our relationship with our emotions. Your emotions are there to help you live your best life. Also tell you when something is wrong and that the body needs help. And then to understand what the body's trying to communicate by decoding these emotions. And this is now where the challenge comes in. I definitely have had moments and days where I feel uncomfortable and I'm thinking, oh my God, I just don't want to deal with this right now. I just don't want these emotions. I just want to push them down. Normally it's because I felt so inadequate. I felt frustrated because I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what my body was trying to tell me and what I'm supposed to do. So in that moment of feeling unresourceful, we try to evade and avoid. And that's where the problem comes in, because the body's language to speak to you becomes louder and more intense. And often, if it speaks through pain, the pain is going to become louder. First of all, it's learning to not feel threatened with your emotions. It's to learn to understand that emotions are there as messengers. When we feel a negative emotion, we immediately feel we need to take control. We feel that we're either out of control or we feel angry and frustrated. So now we have a negative emotion going against the language of the body. So it's really that moment, that space to take a deep breath and just invite the emotion in, invite the symptoms in, because everything has a message. When we feel a negative emotion, sometimes the body, it doesn't matter how intuitive you think you are. I have people saying, oh my God, I'm not intuitive. I can't sense things. I can't do anything. And the reason why that inner voice feels so silent and so quiet is because we need to be able to feel our emotions to decode that inner voice. Because that inner voice speaks to you through emotions and sensations. Think about it. When you get an intuitive message, do you remember the last time, Rosabel, when you had an intuitive message? What did that feel like for you? How did you know that you got an intuitive message? How is your body communicating that to you?
For example, my body was telling me, you're not feeling well. You should turn around, go back home, get some rest. It's okay. I'm going to keep on going. And I kept driving. I'm going to push through. I'm going to push through. By half of the day, I was at work and I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't do this. I have to go home. You know what? I'm going to
Yeah.
listen to my body. My body told me I really need rest. I went home,
Right.
I rested and feel so much better.
That's an excellent example of listening to your body. But listen, so here's the catch. Your body physically didn't feel well. But
Right.
then there was that little message that bridged the physical experience that you were having to the conscious mind, to the body sensations. So it's that bridge, that little voice that said, turn around, go home. That dialogue, it's that little voice that's often very suppressed for us. The reason how we can interpret that is through sensations, through different feelings that come forward that almost literally formulates a very well articulated message. For others, they might see in colors. Others might see in images. Some people see in metaphors. It really depends how your intuition uniquely comes forward to you. It's that little bridge we just discussed. This little messenger is really hard often for people to connect to. And the more we have negative associations with our emotions, the harder it's going to be to connect to that little messenger, because look how that messenger also communicated to you through sensations and emotions.
One way to think about this is, unfortunately, in our current society, emotions are suppressed because there are other things that seem more important. So our emotions take a backseat. We gotta do this. We gotta be a certain way. The less we listen to our emotions, it's like a muscle that weakens. It becomes suppressed, and then it will be more difficult for those emotions to speak to us. And then we wonder why we feel what we feel and we're not able to find the root cause. Or like you say, the easiness of that intuition. If we don't allow, it's like not allowing ourselves to express ourselves.
We train the survival muscle more. We prioritize that more because that's also an instinctive response. When we look at society, everything is stress in the news, so negative and all of this.
Our jobs.
Even in the jobs, what I'm seeing with my clients is there's such a survival response in people's jobs because I'm going to lose my job if I don't do this. You know, it's always all about the reference of living your life in comparison to loss. And that will set anyone off in this incredible fight or flight. And when we are in survival mode, the body doesn't prioritize emotions. That's not important right now. So this is also, like you said, that muscle and that instinctive response muscle becomes much stronger. And so therefore, it's hard when you're looking left, which is where the survival is, and to look right at the same time where the emotions are, because the left side is being prioritized. It's almost completely out of our awareness. So it's about coming back to our relationship with ourselves and coming back to our breath. Something really beautiful that I noticed that is so simple is to use your breath to anchor you. And I use my breath to anchor me. You can just sit and think, okay, let me focus on how I'm breathing, how that air feels as it's moving in and out, and how my body is moving along with that. And just to do that for 2 to 3 minutes really brings a person back into the body. Breath is connected to the vagus nerve, it is connected to the amygdala, and it helps the body to gently regulate, very gently. I'm not saying it's going to take away your trauma, but it helps you connect to yourself in that moment so that we can decode with a bit more clarity. I'm feeling that my chest is tight. Okay, what is the message that's going on? Because sometimes in our environment, things are happening, people are saying things, and this can also even trigger subconscious memory. Sometimes when we are angry at someone, they're not the source of the problem. They just triggered something much deeper, and now there's misdirected responses shooting towards people who are not really part of what is truly going on deep down. It's these moments that when we come back to our breath and just start to feel safe to decode, well, I felt angry right now. Is it really about that person? What did they really say that upset me so much? And is it really that big of a deal? Or is my body trying to tell me that this person pressed on a wounded button? And there's maybe something deeper, more underlying that needs to come forward and be addressed. Overreactions, every single time, it's a clear sign that something deeper is going on. Something has been building until we break. And we've all had these moments. This is a very relatable experience. I have them too. So it's important to backtrack, come back, and feel safe to explore the emotions and feelings that come up. So this is already one way to answer your question from a few minutes ago, how we can start to decode these messages. And the second point is to look at sensations. This is the somatic way that we can now connect to the body as well. There's always different ways because people feel safe with different tools. And that's why it's important to learn multiple ways that we can communicate with the body. Another one that I like to look at is, okay, so if we feel an emotion and you don't feel safe to explore that emotion, that is okay. But let's see, where does it sit in the body? Where's the home for it in the body? Where's the starting point? And some people might say, wow, I feel it really in my shoulder. My shoulder starts to hurt a little bit, or our chest starts to feel like it's a little bit blocked, or my stomach starts to feel a little bit squeezy. Okay, great. What does that part of your body want to do? There's something brewing there, an action that maybe wants to be taken, something that wants to be released. Normally, what works really well is when you ask the person, when your awareness is in that part of your body, what happens next? And let me tell you, every single time, the answer is laser sharp, accurate. That's another gentle way to help people come back into the body and start to decode what could be there.
It's amazing. And another thing I wanted to ask you, a lot of our audience are caregivers, nurses, therapists. These are people who are givers by nature. But what would you say to someone who's hit the burned out point and perhaps they don't feel traumatized in the traditional sense, but they're right at the edge? What would you say to them?
That's a really good question. First of all, I've worked with a lot of caregivers. I've worked with a lot of nurses. The biggest challenge that I see is compassion fatigue. Often because they are natural caregivers, we feel empathy for people. It's impossible not to feel something when you see someone struggling in pain or trying to heal and you're doing their best to support them. Sometimes what happens is that this feels helpless to help them elevate from this stressed state they are in. I've seen this being a very important key factor into what's causing people to feel so fatigued because it's the weight of the responsibility. It is the weight of wishing the best for someone else and feeling, I don't know how to get them there. I don't know how to make them feel better. I see these people even struggling to sleep at nights because they worried about their patients. They're worried about what's going to happen to these people. And it's more impactful when the caregivers know that there's no one in that patient's life who cares about them. They feel it 10 times more because that humanity is still deeply embedded in their heart and they care. That worry triggers cortisol. The hippocampus doesn't like cortisol over long periods of time. And the adrenals also doesn't like too much cortisol. So slowly over time, this constant worry, this constant, are they okay? Are they going to be okay? Is someone going to come for them? At least I am there to support and help them because they have very heightened emotional intelligence to put themselves in someone else's shoes to think, wow, I would have at least wanted someone to be there for me. Well, at least I could be that for that person, right? So it's a very selfless act and a very compassionate, being the compassionate witness, right? They're very good at that. It takes a special type of character to be a nurse. Let me tell you, it's not for everyone. That is the weight of that constant worry that burns people out. It's a slow burning down. It doesn't come on suddenly. It's every day, a little bit more tired, a little bit more tired. And what happens then also when we look at the neuroscience of that, we start to have memory loss. We start to have brain fog, silly little things. I walked into a room, I forgot why I'm here because you're so tired. And memories are not being layered and being impaired when it's trying to be consolidated because of this constant cortisol that's coming into the body and not being released. And secondly, when you're so tired, the last thing you want to do is exercise. But research shows that even if you just go for a 20-minute brisk walk, it helps the body to regulate and build resilience. The more tired you feel, the more important it is actually to just go for a walk. Have your power nap, reset, but to shut down completely, the reference then from being so busy and so stressed to completely collapsing, that is much harder to get back up from versus someone who also went for a walk because you build that resiliency. Okay, I rested, but I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to get back up. I'm going to move a little bit. So it's much easier to come back from that to getting back to work again. And I noticed this with my personal self. I'm personally speaking for myself. And this advice that I've given to other people, they found it actually really made quite a big difference. It didn't solve the challenge. It didn't solve the fatigue, but they did notice a positive improvement in feeling a little bit stronger.
Absolutely. I hear you in such a powerful way. I've been exhausted. I'm also a nurse, although I'm more clinical.
Wow.
I work in the office as a provider. I'm an
Mhm.
advanced nurse, and I'm constantly given. So there's a point in the day when I feel so exhausted. There's a yoga studio near my house, and I always make it a point to go to yoga before I go home. I've been exhausted, but I still go. I'm yawning. I'm tired. But I'm doing it because I'm training my body and building that resiliency. And I feel so much better after that. I come home, take a shower. It's like, feel so much better.
And thank you for confirming that because that's really important. And I
Yes.
love the self-love that you're giving yourself, passion that you give to others. You have to give that compassion to yourself as well.
Yes.
And another thing, just a fun exercise that also really helps with the fatigue. Remember, Rosabel, where you were maybe in a cafe or walking somewhere or maybe at work, and you saw someone standing there. You couldn't see their face, but you just felt the sudden heaviness. There's nothing about that person to validate to you why you feel the way that you do. And it's like, oh, what's going on? This is the empath response because what we actually do is it's also an instinctive response. We're constantly connecting through our senses to our environment to scan what's going on, how people feeling, what's happening.
In order for me to get to my office where I work, I cross cancer center and I see so many patients on my way. Some of them look tired or elderly in wheelchairs. And I can feel that feeling like silently saying a prayer for whatever it is that's going on in their life. So I gotta admit, I'm a little bit of an empath.
Exactly. It's absorbing and taking on people's emotions because that emotional response you had to someone, even though you didn't see their face, there was information being exchanged between the two of you. and your body changed to such an extent. You felt almost down or a little bit heavy or a little bit tired
But
from
what I
just that
actually
moment.
do is actually I imagine I'm in like a radiant bubble or something that I'm like giving them something. That's why I feel tired at the end of the day. Put so much energy out there. I imagine
Right.
it sometimes it's like a blue light or sometimes it's golden because I just want to give them something. Maybe
Of
that's why I'm so
course.
exhausted.
Exactly. Look at where your hands were when you said, I'm giving. It came from the solar plexus. That's your
Yes.
power center. Imagine like a power generator.
Oh, that's what I feel.
Yeah.
Depression, sadness, I feel it like right.
Here.
I feel its
Yeah.
tightness here. It feel everything it's in here.
So it's the heart also, but the solar plexus is below the heart. So
Right.
that sternum is very deeply connected for people. Sometimes this is also where we give our power and our energy away because the heart is the biggest electromagnetic field receiver to give and receive. Our electromagnetic field is collecting this data also through our senses and through what's called the quantum field. We cannot deny that it exists because this is what's called quantum entanglement. How else is that information being exchanged between you and that person you cannot see on their face? Your mirror neurons are not reacting to their micro expressions to relate to how they're feeling, which could then elicit the feelings, right? It's a pure intuitive response. You've walked into a room, right? There's no one there. And then suddenly you just felt, oof, I feel really down right now. Oh, this doesn't feel good. I don't feel welcome here. That's because of the stress of the previous person, or maybe the collective amount of people that was in that room, and you're feeling the aftermath of that. Where is that information coming from? There's nothing in that room to prove it to you, but your body changed to the extent where you can feel it. Like it changed your state completely. It's so exciting.
It is because sometimes I'm scrolling through social media or news and I saw that there's recent evidence. Of course, it's now the evidence. We know this. It's perhaps what we call the aura. Scientists have discovered that human bodies, whether it's the brain or body itself, transmit energy that trespasses. Like, I don't even know how far, but it's just like a
8 feet,
connection. And that's how people are like, oh, no wonder it's kind of like we can communicate with other people that are not even so close. And it's like some sort of a telepathic communication. I need to read in that study. I want to see exactly what they say, but you probably know more than I do.
Isn't that beautiful? Because here's the power now. Here's the power of what's happening. So now in this case, it's influencing you in a negative way. But what if we can turn that around? What if next time for anyone feeling exhausted, anyone feeling tired, what you can do, the power of our imagination is so strong that the body doesn't recognize the difference between an actual event and our imagination. That's how powerfully the body responds, right? So let's use that to our advantage. What I teach nurses, first responders, and people who work with very heightened, stressful circumstances and environments really heavy is from the heart and the solar plexus to imagine a yellow ball of light or a white spark of light. And then imagine that becoming bigger and bigger, but from the inside out. And as it fills up your whole body, just imagine all cords and attachments, right? It's an energetic boundary. And the reason it's better to push it out is because this will allow your space to free up so that you are stronger and in a better position to actually help people, right? Because by holding on their stuff, it's not helping you and it's not helping them. So it's actually just pushing it out and imagining that either cords are being cut or just imagine that all of the stress is coming out of your space. And then pushing it out to the point where you just imagine that you're in a bubble and notice how you take a deep breath after doing that. The reason why people normally just spontaneously, instinctively take a deep breath, there's space. There's space. So I invite you to try that. Do that before walking into the office. Maybe lunchtime, just remind yourself to do that again, push it out. And then when you leave the office, between your office and the yoga studio, create your bubble again. Just push it out and have your bubble. And you're going to notice a significant shift in your energy. I've taught this to nurses who believed and who were non-believers, and they all love it. I've taught this to doctors, especially doctors who often have to operate for hours on end. They feel weighed down by stress. This is a really simple but fun, excellent way of reestablishing that space and boundary of that, because Rosabel, and I know that you know this, as a caregiver, you are terrible with boundaries. You're not good with boundaries because you are the compassionate witnesses, right? We care way too much about how other people will feel or be hurt. I don't want to be responsible for that. Therefore, I hold back or continue to carry. So, this is a gentle, graceful way of setting boundaries without hurting anyone.
It's interesting now that you mention boundaries because that is completely true. At times, we feel guilty when we set up boundaries. Recently, I had a situation where, for my own safety and sanity, I had to put this boundary. And it
Yes.
felt like something just got stripped away from me. It's heavy.
Oh,
And to the point that you feel like you have to recover from it. It's like, but it has to be done. It's not easy.
Exactly. And I mean, it is beautiful that you recognize that. And it's good that you took action on that, because this is now the challenge for a lot of caretakers. They feel that, but they don't take action on that. And
Exactly.
that's where it becomes draining. It becomes more stressful. We start to develop more negative thoughts around the problem. And that in itself creates more added stress to the problem that we are initially experiencing. So it's almost like it escalates. Yeah, it escalates. Yeah.
But then when you go to the other side of the boundary, you realize, oh, I am so relieved. I don't have to put up with
Right.
this. There is peace in my life. And then you begin to be thankful and to know sometimes you have to face the things you don't need in your life to know what exactly you need and what you want in your life. That's the way I look at it.
I love that. And if I may, I would love to share a simple mindset hack that anyone can try when they are in a situation like that, because our emotions get involved, right? And now we feel, should I, shouldn't I? I'm confused. Oh my God, what about how this other person's going to feel? So we get so emotionally involved. What I love in what I do, because I also work sometimes with people who are hurt or going through a lot of traumatic circumstance. I mean, you see them. I work more so online. My clients sometimes are stage 4 cancer or people who have just came out of incredibly violent domestic abusive circumstances. When I feel myself getting pulled into it, I normally call my future wiser self. And I ask this part of me to come in and help mediate this situation, because your future wiser self have already been through this and done all of that. There is a part of us that is intelligent, incredible, beautiful, that is divine, but it's sometimes just hampered by trauma, fears, and stress. So it's a beautiful way to reconnect back to that part of us that is not influenced by trauma, because that part does exist. And then I call that future wiser self of me to come forward. And every time she says, Evette, make a decision now that me, your future wiser self, will thank you for. Sometimes that question alone makes me realize, how will my future wiser self feel if I don't express a polite boundary right now? What will the consequences be for that for me? So it's almost like you're able to start to take the situation from a different angle. And then I ask my future wiser self, what would you do? You have to try it to believe it. And this is another tool and trick that I also teach people who are in caregiving circumstances, even professionally. It can be someone looking after a parent at home full time because the parent can't afford to go to a caring unit where they can be looked after. That gets even more emotional when you're now looking after a parent or a loved one, because the emotional connection is even stronger. I've had to coach a few people through that with compassionate boundaries that's for the best interest for the person affected and the person that they're looking after.
And that is so important, not only for the relationship itself.
Yeah.
Right? I know that a big part of your work is helping people release those stored emotions, perhaps without being re-traumatized. Can you walk us through what that means in practical terms?
What's the most important thing to do when we start to heal? What I see a lot of practices don't necessarily prioritize is a person is not going to heal or shift or change or even start new healthy habits if they don't feel safe in what you are trying to help them transition into. This is very important to create a sense of safety and stability within them in relationship to the change you're trying to help them create. If someone would say, wow, Evette, I would love to have a new relationship. Okay, we need to maybe look at, is there a fear of finally receiving the love that you deep down know that you deserve? It's not about prepping that person for the relationship. It's about prepping them to receive that love in a healthy way so that they match themselves with someone who can give them healthy love and not unhealthy love in terms of what their nervous system is wired for from the past. So this is really important, is to focus on, do I feel safe with what I want? Because if you don't, you can go ahead with the healing process. But your chances of sabotaging it is, if we feel safe with what we want, there's no reason to sabotage it. And the results will remain. We'll stay connected to it and we'll flourish in it. First and foremost is that feeling safe, because that will also help the person to let go of their fear of change. I cannot tell you how many people come to me and we end up working on a hidden subconscious sabotage or benefit in relationship to the issue that they wanted to work on in the first place. As an example, they say, maybe I would like to come because I want to overcome my fear of public speaking. Great. So now my question would be, what in your life would change that you are not ready to change if you could just fluently speak and express yourself? Normally people feel this incredible feeling of collapse. I will be attacked. I will be judged and criticized. Instead of, let's take away this underlying pain and distress that you feel that you have associated with speaking your truth. That helps to bridge the person in a more graceful way to achieving their outcome and having lasting results. So that fear of public speaking is not really speaking. It's a fear maybe of being judged, of being attacked, and so forth. It can be different for all of us. It doesn't mean that that's what it's going to be, but that is a great example. Then we need to look at, how did I respond to the trauma? Or how does the stress make me feel? This is now the opinion that we talked about a little bit earlier. Now we need to look at, what is your opinion around this trauma or this stress? Because that opinion has created a ton of stories, other little additional fears that's now being triggered along with this moment of stress. How can we now gently and safely let these thoughts go? Because all these associations is locking that pain in place. And then we also look at, what do we need to elicit? What do we need to instill and bring in, which is a positive resource? What will help you to feel stronger in this moment of stress? Sometimes people can say, I need to love myself more. Okay, great. We bring that in. We work on eliciting that strong belief so that it can come forward stronger in these moments, maybe of stress or in new circumstances, so that that inner resource is solid. That's really important. And then we also look at, what is the instinctive response in the body? When we experience heightened stress or long-term low-level stress, it doesn't matter. Your instinctive responses never, ever stops to scan your environment. We need to look at, how is the nervous system showing up in relationship to this problem? And that needs to be reset and rebalanced. As a tool that we also bring in is bilateral processing. So we help the left and the right hemisphere to gently integrate the trauma in a non-traumatic way. Because what's incredibly important for me, and I'm very strict about this, is that you don't have to relive your trauma to heal it. A lot of the times you don't have to talk about it. And you don't have to have accurate memories as to what had happened. Because the body is going to accurately take us to where it needs to go in a safe way, often through just simple sensations and symptoms. And memories, by the fifth time that you recall a memory, 50% of its validity has changed. I can't tell you how many times I have had people come to me trying to heal something that never happened. because of projection from the practitioner. Oh, if you feel that, do you think maybe that happened? And then we create and formulate in our imagination a scenario where that could be possible. Under a moment of stress, people hold on to that moment because we're trying to make sense of how we feel. And that seems most plausible. Oh, maybe that happened. Based on how we feel in that moment, that influences how the memory comes forward. And also how we feel when we file the memory back, meaning when we disconnect from that memory. So there's so many scenarios affecting memories. I'm very cautious of working with them. I do validate them. We talk about them. But my main focus, Rosabel, it's emotions. It's emotions and the somatic responses in the body because they will never lie. It's the
Absolutely.
most raw, authentic experience that the human body can have. And because of that vulnerability, that rawness that comes through emotions, we suppress it because the power of it. But it's also the power of it being the gateway to helping you to live a better life.
And now, your latest book is The Metaphysical Anatomy.
So that's the big book with the 722 medical elements and then the emotions that impact them. I would love to send you a copy because of where you are. You will love it. I have that book being used by hospitals, clinics, psychologists, psychiatrists. When a client or a patient comes to them and they have a certain disease or ailment, they go through the book to see what is going on in their mind, what is going on in their body. And it's actually helped people treat people better, understand their patients. It's a fun book to use. And just even for any person who's interested in using it for their own lives to help to understand
Right.
themselves. The latest book is Solving Pain Without Pills. That's the 21st book.
I would love to read it. I love reading. I have quite some authors that come through the show, and I love reading their books and taking a look at it.
I'm happy to send it to you. I think you'll enjoy it.
Yes, beautiful.
The new one is an extension of that. But to answer your question, I have a free book that's called Restoring the Emotional Body. That book really dives into the theory, the research, the explanations of emotions and how they impact the body, and the fun guide to help you understand messages in the body. And it's a book that supports metaphysical anatomy. So, but the book is free. So yeah, that's
Awesome.
also a fun book to read.
I did want to talk to you about something perhaps a little bit personal. It seems like you have experienced some major life events, including a heart attack. I just wanted
Yeah.
to know, what did that moment teach you about trauma, the body, and your own limits?
That's a really great question. What I learned was a stress-induced heart attack. And what that taught me was how my unresolved anger towards my father deeply impacted me subconsciously, consciously, and throughout my body. I thought I dealt with it, but I ended up doing was I used the anger combined with the dopamine releases and associated the two with getting tasks done, especially on my ladder to success. So the foundation of my success and achievements and these dopamine hits was my anger. Subconsciously, I didn't realize how I solidified that anger throughout my psyche and body, needing that anger to maintain my success because I felt that this gave me power, boundaries. I could connect, walk, speak. I could do what I need. I felt confident, but it was all false. On top of that, I used eustress. We all know eustress, positive stress, thinking, wow, this is great. I love this. This is the tick, 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 the boxes. And this eustress masked the anger that I was feeling. And like anything in life, organs, the heart, it doesn't like anger. If you want to damage and destroy your heart, hold on to that anger because let me tell you, I had a stress-induced heart attack as a result of that. And what it taught me was that I needed to completely reconstruct my definition of success, how I achieve my goals, and how I love myself because I needed to learn to feel safe without the anger.
Wow.
That was the biggest step, to learn to feel safe without the anger, because that anger protected me. My father was a violent drug addict and alcoholic, and I was the only child. There was no one to share that burden with. Everything came to me. So that anger, the rage, the injustice, the frustration, the unfairness, all of that just simmered. And my positive stress, the eustress, masked that.
What I think I love about your story is how we can, in your case, my case, I like to lead by example. I want to show people that I am a human. I want people to come to you, to me, not because, what we have learned through science, but also through our human experiences, right? We kind of have walked the road. I have so much in common with so many of my guests. For example, in your case, you mentioned you're the only child, same way here. I was also an only child,
Right.
and my dad was also, and the first year of my life, he was an alcoholic, and he was very abusive physically. So when you're telling this story, I can see myself there in a way, that little child. So
Yeah.
I can understand what you're mentioning. And you're right. A lot of times our
Mhm.
subconscious, we think we have dealt with these things. For the most part, I feel like I have dealt, but my dad's still alive. He lives in Colombia. I lived here in the US. There's a few times when there's some few buttons and it kind of brings them back in there. When it comes to
Right.
trauma and all these experiences, it's a daily process. It's a continuous work. It's not something
Yeah.
that we fix.
It's definitely a process. Because when that heart attack came, like you said, it's a process. It really is, because it happened before I turned 30. I was in the prime of my career, traveling the world, doing great, and
Yeah.
just boom.
Yeah,
My body just
and you
signaled.
probably have heard of broken heart syndrome. So basically, there's no real physical ailment. It's just all
Yeah.
coming from emotions, and it's a real thing.
You know what the doctor said to me when I was in a third world country? He came into my room. I'm still out of breath. I felt weak. I was dizzy. And he threw this white box of pills on my bed and said, "Get out of my hospital. You don't have a heart problem. You have a stress problem." He gave me Valium and I was discharged that day. That's how strong in his head. He's like, "You don't have a heart problem. Don't come and occupy my hospital. Get out. Go deal with your stress." Compassion or just holding the space just a little bit.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have quite some patients I come across where recognize it. Even the patients said, "I just have a lot of stress. I just have a lot of stress from work."
Wow.
And
The
that's
awareness
how
is there.
And that's how I have recognized a lot of the things. It was like, wow, there's a lot of it that's here is trauma, because we look
Yeah.
everywhere. We can find any physical reasons why this person's having all these neurological problems. And I'm like, medically, I cannot do much. And I'm not a counselor necessarily, but I'm thinking like, where do I send them to work through this trauma? What can I say to them to help? That's the
Yeah.
caregiver in me, like always carries that with me. What can I do for them? If I could only bring them some comfort, Wow.
Exactly.
Last question before we wrap up. What does healing mean to you today in this season of your life?
For me, healing would mean to feel content with where you are in your life, to feel content with yourself. If a person sits there and think I have to heal everything, even that in itself can become another distraction, another stressful point that we're just recreating. And that is what we don't want. So what I learned in my journey, I had to backtrack. For me now, it's just to work on myself to the point where I truly feel, okay, I feel content. Sometimes there's things that go wrong. We will deal with it. But that inner peace, that anchor, my breath, coming back to that and holding that has been the holy grail of healing for me, because you're going to have an ailment or headaches or that grumpy person that just ruins your day. It's going to happen. So expect it, but also expect peace, expect the good things. Healing for me means to focus more on what's going right instead of what is going wrong. Because just that mindset alone has helped me to feel I am healing. I am doing well. I am changing, moving forward. And that is what continues to bring me back to contentment.
That is
So that's my answer.
I love what you say, because I have come up with my own definition of success. I actually define success
Tell me.
kind of like what you define healing. I said, to me, success is
Okay.
being content with who you are, whatever you are in life. So I love it, because I was like, oh, success, healing, being whole. It makes sense. It's not about being perfect. It's about feeling in your happy place. Because like I always
Yeah.
say, being happy is not a destination, a moment in time in the future. It's what you make with what you have at the moment.
Yeah.
That brings me to that. Wow, this has been such a powerful talk. Thank you not only for sharing your knowledge, but also opening your heart and even your own story with
Yeah.
us. I know
Thank
the
you.
audience will definitely, especially those who are quietly carrying emotional
Yeah.
burdens, pain, and burnout. For everybody out there, if this conversation resonated with you, I want you to hit our website, www.metaphysicalanatomy. And you offer retreats, huh?
I do. Next year, we're doing a Reveal the Woman Within retreat. It's a retreat where women can come to catch your
Yeah.
breath, just breathe. There's a lot of receiving. I love about it. Women get their own private room, so you can bring your partner, you can bring a friend if you want. And it's in Bali. Who doesn't
Wow.
want to come to Bali for a holiday? It's a really beautiful space. I love
Oh,
the
wow.
retreats because it's a nice way to pamper people in a beautiful setting. The energy here in Bali is so nurturing. It has a very mother nurturing feel to it. When you're here, you just feel so held.
Yes. I'm
I
definitely
love
going to
that.
check it out in your free book and all the information that you have on
Yeah.
there. Thank you
Cool.
so much. It's a
For
pleasure
having
chatting
me.
with you. So everybody, until next time, take care of your body. Remember, your body speaks through. Stay unscripted. Goodbye.